So now with the higher order component created, let's maybe also use it in the person.js file for a singular person, where I also want to have a class around it, right? I use my aux component here because I wanted to demonstrate the aux component, but we actually have some CSS class code set up that we could use here. Now, we can, of course, simply import with class here from the higher order component folder and then the with class file. And then we can use this higher order component on the person component as well. It's not limited to being used in one component only. You can bring it into any component that needs the functionality this higher order component adds. And the functionality this higher order component adds is that it adds a wrapping div with some CSS code. So therefore, let's now use it here with class. And let's pass the person component as the first argument. And the class I want to add is classes.person using the CSS modules and this person class here. Now with that, we have everything set up that should bring back our styles for the persons. So if we toggle them, yeah, the styling is back, but the data is missing. And do you know what's wrong here? The data is missing because what we're doing is we're taking our person component and right before we export it, we pass it into the with class function. Now, what does the with class function do? The with class function takes the component and outputs it, not before wrapping it into an extra div that adds the CSS class. The div doesn't really matter, but what is missing on the wrapped component, which in the case of the person component being passed is just our person component? Well, it's missing all its props. I'm outputting wrapped component like this, and I haven't set any props here. Of course, we could set name as a prop here, but for one, this is now hard-coded, and second, now every component using that higher order component would receive Maximilian, as we can see here. And that is certainly not what we want, even though it's a great name, of course. Well, we can pass props dynamically, and that is a pretty powerful feature of JavaScript and React. We actually do accept our props here, and this will be the props of our wrapped component because we return this functional component in our higher order component. So ultimately, this with class thing here returns the functional component that wraps our person component. So we export whatever with class returns. So we export this functional component returned by with class. And therefore, anyone importing from person component and using the export here as person, as we do it here in the persense file, this here refers just to the result of the with class call. So it refers to this functional component. And therefore, any props we pass to person here in the persons component will end up in our with class component here. So props will actually be the right props. And now we can use a JSX syntax that allows us to forward props to the wrapped component. Now, what doesn't work is that you set props equal to props, because React automatically takes all the attributes you add to your JSX code and combines them in a props object. So now props would not replace that props object, but be added as a single property in the props passed to the wrapped component. But instead, you can use another syntax where you use curly braces and then a feature called the spread operator, where you spread the props you're getting. The props you're getting here is a JavaScript object, and the spread operator pulls out all the properties that are inside of this props object and distributes them as new key value pairs on this wrapped component. So if props here is a JavaScript object with a name of Maximilian and an age of 28, then this syntax here will effectively set name equal to Maximilian and age equal to 28, like this. This is in the end what will happen here, automatically behind the scenes for you. And therefore now, with this setup here, if we save that on the reloaded page, you see our data is back and it works just as it did before, thanks to props being used and props being passed to the wrapped component here.